Hi, my name is Dr. John Douillard, and today I want to talk about grains, whole grains, refined grains, wheat, and talk about, do we really have to stop eating wheat? Is it really public enemy number one? Of course, I wrote a book called Eat Wheat, but there's some new research that just came out last week. It was based on an 18-year study from the year 1991 to 2014 with middle to older age folks who generally have a tendency to gain more belly fat over the years. They have a tendency to increase their cholesterol, their triglycerides, their blood sugar, their blood pressure. All cardiovascular risk factors tend to increase in folks as we age in America and really around the world. So they measured those 5 risk factors, and they measured how much refined wheat and grain they had versus whole grain. On average, they had about 1/2 to 3 servings of whole grains per day, and those were the whole grain eaters, and they had a similar amount of servings of refined grains during this study. Today, the average American gets 5 servings of refined grains per day. And that's stripped away all the bran, all the fiber, all the oils that are really critically important for supporting, healthy skin, healthy complexion, healthy immunity, all that. So there you have it. So they did a study and they found that the people who ate the most of the grain, the whole grain, the high whole grain eaters, during the course of the 18-year study, they only gained about 1/2 an inch in their waistline. But at the refined grain folks or the low whole grain folks, they saw a significant increase of their waistline, more than 1 inch per year. So it was sort of interesting to see that, in America, the tendency is to gain a little bit more weight, which is normal. But the key takeaway from this study was that people who ate more whole grain saw significantly lower cholesterol, significantly lower triglycerides, significantly higher HDL levels, and a thinner waistline, and of course lower blood sugar, which I thought was a pretty cool study for us to become aware of. Now, I'm not a big believer of eating wheat every day of the year, all year round, 3 times a day, or grain. I believe it's a seasonal food. I believe all foods are a seasonal food. I think we should be thinking about what we can eat more of in the right season as opposed to what we should never eat. And so the amylase, which is the enzyme for digesting wheat, actually increases in our bodies in a circadian manner every fall when the wheat is actually harvested. But in spring and summer, as we're in now, you really don't have a lot of grain digesting potential. Doesn't mean you can't eat wheat or can't eat starch. You can definitely eat them, but it should be less when you should be eating more of the greens and the vegetables coming out of your garden, as opposed to eating the grains which are harvested in the fall to store, help us gain a little bit of weight, insulate us for the coming winter months, right? And we have different bugs in our gut called bacteroidetes in the summer, end of summer, for digesting starch and carbohydrates, and we have different bugs in our gut in the spring called actinobacteria that are really good at digesting fat and fiber, right? So it makes sense that we should do what our ancestors did, which is live much more closely to the circadian rhythms of nature. And the bugs on the plants, the grains or the vegetables, whatever season you're in, those bugs are inoculating our gut with the proper healthy bugs for the right season, to dissipate heat in the summer, for example, to boost immunity in the winter, for example, or to decongest you in the spring. But they also transport the circadian rhythms. They carry the rhythms of the earth and the vibration with them, and they help keep our body in circadian rhythms, and they help to reset our circadian clock. So all good reasons why we should eat different foods in different seasons, but we're going into the grain season, and I wanted to make the case that, maybe not eating grains is maybe not the best idea to do years after year after year, because our ancestors absolutely did eat grain. They found gluten in the teeth of ancient humans 3.5 million years ago. They were baking bread 17,000 years ago, which means they were at least harvesting grain many years before they started baking the bread, right? So there's a lot of research that you're not being told. You're being told grains are bad. They're not bad, they're just harder to digest. And the harder to digest grain, the anti-nutrients on beans and grains and legumes, the lectins, the phytic acids, they provide a stimulation effect in the intestinal lining, which creates our gut immunity, which is 70% of your immune response. When you take those grains or hard to digest foods out of the diet, because you don't feel good eating them, and I get it. If you don't feel good eating a food, why in the world would you eat it? But if you just take it out of the diet and you don't understand or ask the question or fix the reason why it is not digesting, where maybe when you were 18 you could, but now you can't, it makes me think, we're just sweeping this problem under the rug by taking the food out of the diet. And how do we fix it? We need to reboot the digestive strength. And I have an ebook, it's a free ebook at lifespa.com called the Troubleshoot Your Digestion ebook. And it troubleshoots every aspect of your digestive system, whether it be stomach acid, liver bile flow, pancreatic duodenal enzymes, intestinal skin issues, leaky gut issues, altered microbiome issues, lymph congestion around and inside the intestinal tract, all of those, eliminative issues, constipation, loose stools. All of those things are covered so you can troubleshoot which part of your digestion is broken down. So you have the luxury of eating the right food in the right season to get the right bugs in your gut at the right season and maintain a healthy connection between you, your rhythms, and the rhythms of nature, which is called circadian medicine or circadian science, which is now Nobel Prize winning science, right? So it's something we really shouldn't ignore. It's something we really have to tap into. We now know that the bugs should change from season to season, and they support our circadian rhythms and the biological clocks which turn on and off in our body, in every cell of the body, throughout the day and the night, which is really, really important. And when you just ignore and just take the food out of the diet and you become gluten-free, for example, and you lose those foods, those hormetic foods that create a little bit of an irritation to trigger what we call gut immunity, which is 70% of your immune response. And then if you just go into eating foods that you can eat and tolerate, which are easier to digest, you become less strong of a digester. So you're marching down the road of getting less and less foods that are harder to digest. So anything harder to digest becomes something we take out, and then you have a situation where you can't digest much of anything. And I see too many of my patients in my practice that can't eat any grains at all. And we have millions of years of our ancestors eating grains significantly. So it's really a scary sign because that represents gut immunity. And is that gut immunity issue, the lack thereof, causing us to be more vulnerable to the next latest viral, bacterial, opportunistic, undesirable bacterial infection? Well, I would highly suggest that you're unrecognized the balance between your gut immunity and your gut strength, digestive strength, and your gut immunity. And we know that the quality of the intestinal skin, based on the microbiome in your intestinal tract, is linked directly to respiratory immunity and the microbiome that lives in your respiratory tract or your lungs. They're all intimately connected. So when Ayurveda said 85% of all disease comes from poor digestion, the science is in, it's true. Now we have to be able to not just say, oh, this food feels bad, I'm never going to eat it again. We need to think, how can I get my digestive strength, my detox ability, my immune strength strong enough again to tolerate those foods? And that's why it's really important. So in a couple of studies related to this hormetic effect of hard to digest grains, wheats, nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, lectins, phytic acids, all those things, they found that when people were gluten-free, they had significantly more good bacteria. When people were gluten-free, they had significantly more bad bacteria in the gut. And when people were, compared to people who were eating wheat, when people were eating wheat, they had 4 times less mercury in their blood than people who were gluten-free. The killer T cell count was significantly higher, a measure of immunity for people who were eating wheat, and less in people who were gluten-free. And of course, there was more microbial diversity with people who were eating grain and glutinous grains like wheat versus being gluten-free. Studies also show that people who eat grains and wheat had significantly less risk of, this was a 100,000 plus study published from the Harvard Medical School. People who ate whole grains and wheat had significantly less diabetes and significantly less heart disease than people who were gluten-free or grain-free, right? So really important to have some background. And what I'm saying is, hey, let's gear up our digestion before fall kicks in and all those grains are being harvested, and begin to bring some of those grains into our system. Now I'm talking about good grains like kamut and einkorn and unprocessed grains. That's what you're really looking to eat. And don't eat them in massive quantities, but definitely get your fair share because they do provide significant benefit. One study showed that those grains are hydrating agents. So they hydrate us. Well, what do you need in the winter when it's dry? We need to deeply hydrate our tissues, and those grains provide that level of hydration, which is, I think, also pretty cool. Okay, well, there you have it. There's an article here about all the science that I cited in this study, and you can find all that at lifespa.com. And thanks for listening. I'll see you next week. Do you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe and share.
This recording is brought to you by LifeSpa, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Get access to free health video newsletters by Dr. John at lifespa.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.